starting off here at Independence Hall, and this is where the Declaration of Independence was written inside there, and the American Constitution was written inside here as well. This is definitely one of the most historic buildings in America. And the Liberty Bell used to hang up top there, but now it's in this building that's made just to hold it over here. And Independence Hall is 290 years old. Really historical. All the American founding fathers were here. Very, very cool building though.
Second Continental Congress met, and on July 2nd of 1776, they adopted a resolution that these united colonies had right and ought to be free and independent states. And then John Adams went back to wherever he was staying and wrote this very nice letter to his wife Abigail, which you can now read on the internet. And he basically tells her that we are going to have parades and celebrations and illuminations throughout the continent every year hereafter, celebrating this momentous day, July 2nd. Is that what happens? No. What day do we celebrate? July 4th. I feel bad for John Adams. The only reason we celebrate July 4th, folks, is because that's the day that made it to the top of the paper you would have seen. That paper would have looked like this. On July 4th, they adopted the Declaration of Independence in this room after making over 70 changes to the original draft, and then they had it printed. The Continental Congress doesn't have social media. So they need to distribute this to the states, to the army, to be read out loud, to be printed in the newspaper. And this is what people saw in 1776. Because again, we're trying to convince you to be on our side. And maybe we can get a major European power like France to also ally with us. So they do sign the Declaration of Independence in this room on August 2nd. That copy lives in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And that copy, quite frankly, was for the men in this room. It was theirs. They never thought that you would go look at it in a museum. This is ours. And this is our first public forum, really, where we're announcing that we're this place called the United States of America. That is not one country in 1776. That is 13 countries. Because are all the states the same? No. So we have our different cultural backgrounds. We're going to write our own state constitutions. And everybody is printing their own money, including the Continental Congress. So it's very messy. I like to think of them, they're 13 little countries, united in a common cause. They don't want a king. They're going to fight a war. They're going to be independent. And since they don't want anyone to have any absolute power, they wrote something called the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. It is a treaty of friendship between these 13 states. We will have a Congress. Every state gets multiple delegates. Every state gets one vote. And the only way to make any major decisions is to get all 13 to agree. And that is how you end up here with me today, in a national park. Because a government based on unanimous decisions is not going to work. I think that could be our unanimous decision today. Well, 1783, the Revolutionary War ends, and we turn into 13 brothers and sisters all fighting over who gets to have the biggest bedroom in the house.
What's a bedroom?
A bedroom?
Oh.
Yeah. I know I would have fought for a bigger bedroom. I'm number 6. All right? In the list of siblings, maybe. But in the 1783, examples of this include Maryland being angry that Virginia could just make itself a little bit bigger. Maryland can't do that because Virginia is in the way. My personal favorite is the 3rd time people from Connecticut moved to northeastern Pennsylvania and said, this is part of Connecticut now. Obviously, the Pennsylvanians fought back and won. Congress is so weak, the delegates stopped going, and it is decided that in May of 1787, we will have a convention here in Philadelphia, here in this room, to try to fix these Articles of Confederation. Didn't happen though, because Rhode Island did not send any delegates. So these guys decide we will keep the windows and doors closed, notes are secret, George Washington is here, he is elected to preside over this convention. He sat in this chair up here, that is our only original object from this building in this room. And yeah, he sat up there, and yeah, he presided over the convention, but he only talked 3 or 4 times total in 4 months. Because what were they arguing about instead but a plan for a national government with 3 branches, a judiciary, a legislature, and an executive. And a lot of these guys would leave because they don't like this idea of a national government. Others would stay, and they're going to argue about things like, should we have 3 presidents or 1? When we still talk about today, who gets to pick the president? Only 2 or 3 of these guys said popular vote, and even though they didn't mean everybody voting, others said no. So we have the Electoral College as our compromise. Well, my personal favorite is, how long do you get to be the president? We take advantage that it is a 4-year term. Some of these guys thought it should only be 2. Others thought it should be 7. And during a 6-hour-long speech that Alexander Hamilton made in this room, he suggested that you should be able to be president for the span of your natural life, based on good behavior. That was Hamilton's idea. Well, when it comes to who picks the president, one suggestion about the most. They spent over a month trying to figure out if it should be one house or two. And if it's two, do we base it on the population? That's what James Madison wanted. Both those houses on the population, because he was from Virginia, the state with the most people living in it. Roger Sherman of Connecticut did not think that that was fair. So everyone gets 2 senators, the House of Representatives is based on the population. Then they're going to argue about who picks Congress, their term limits, their powers, and then the biggest topic of all, which is the hardest to find, and that is slavery. Because you will not see that word in the final product anywhere. It's not there, but it is there. Most of us are familiar with the 3/5 clause. Slave people are counted as 3/5 of all other persons in the census. They have no rights. Bigger issue is, though, they protected slavery. And that is going to force Congress to pass things like the Fugitive Slave Act. And then, suddenly, it's 1861, and the Civil War begins. But that goes back to this room, and these decisions that were made. But September 17th, 1787, 39 names are attached to this plan. It is the United States Constitution. As I said, it's why you're here today in a national park. National parks are created by Congress passing legislation for the president to sign. So Harry Truman created our park. And then, in reality, we're not like these guys in 1787, except for one thing. Still arguing about the Constitution. They argued about creating it. We argue about how we use it. We also argue about whether or not we think it's perfect and complete. And I would say thousands, if not millions of people would say no, including one of the signers, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin did not think the Constitution was perfect, but he had hope for this republic that he summarized very nicely when he talked about the half-sun that was carved on the back of the president's chair. Benjamin Franklin said that during the debates over the Constitution, he would stare at the sun, and he would wonder if it was rising or setting. And after he signed the Constitution, he looked at the sun and said at length, "Now I have the happiness to know that this is a rising and not a setting sun." Here we are, 234 years later. I think Benjamin Franklin, quite frankly, and I can only guess at this, would be both pleased and also surprised. So folks, thank you for your attention. If you want to take any final photos of this room, feel free. When you're ready to exit, you're going to head out here and to the right.
Here I am at the Liberty Bell.
So
You can see Independence Hall just behind it in the background.
What happened the day that the bell
This is one of the big symbols of America.
It was probably
There's a crack in the bell you can see.
This bell was rang a lot of different days. It's what's called an assembly bell. So, for example, if you have to be somewhere at a certain time, are you with a sports team?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have to be at practice at a certain time, how do you know when to be there?
That's fine.
Walking down from Independence Hall, which is a couple blocks down that way, over to Christchurch Burial Ground in an annoying car. And we come across the grave of Benjamin Franklin here. One of the real great Americans. Of course, the man on the $100 bill. Him and his wife Deborah are buried here. Christchurch Burial Ground in Philadelphia. Alright, now I'll walk down to Christchurch itself, which is a very historical church in American history. And I'll explain that as we get there. On the way to Christchurch, here's a fire station with Benjamin Franklin. You can see here, there's a big Franklin bust over here. That's kind of cool. Keep on walking down the street till we get to Christchurch. On the way to Christchurch, here's Betsy Ross's house, the creator of the famous American flag. This is her house from the 1700s. There's the original flag she created. I mean, not the one, but what it looked like. Pretty cool. Courtyard here, and here's her grave coming up here. Certainly one of the most famous women in American history. This is the parlor of Betsy Ross's house.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
History shot of it. Yep. And here is one of the real historic churches of America, Christchurch. From the 1600s. This is where William Penn, who the state of Pennsylvania was named after, was baptized, and the baptismal font is still there. George Washington attended services here. So I'll just show you this real quick. This is historic Christchurch, Mason's Church, established in 1695. Some of the people that attended this church were many of the Declaration of Independence signers: George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Betsy Ross as well. And this, of course, before there was a White House in Washington, D.C., this is where the first two presidents served, in Philadelphia. And this was their church as well. George Washington, the first president of America, followed by John Adams. And this is actually the pew where they sat in when they attended church service here. Like I said, this pew is from the 1600s as well. And it was where William Penn was baptized. And yes, my original assessment was right. It was the tallest building in America from its completion in 1754 until 1810. So, pretty cool. It also has more of the Declaration of Independence signers and Constitution signers buried in its graveyard than anywhere else. This one here is number 70, Benjamin Franklin's pew. That him and his wife and daughter sat in. Very, very cool. And one last view of Christchurch before I head on. Okay. And this next stop is Alfred Alley, which is the oldest continuously inhabited street in America of all the original 13 colonies. And yes, indeed, people do still live in it. So this is pretty cool. We'll walk down the street. You can see people have got the Union Jack up as well as the old American flag. And you can see here, welcome to Alfred Alley. Yes, people really do live here and have since 1713. You can see that's why they have the Union Jack and stuff up here, because this street has been around since long before America was even a country. And living continuously here since 1713. Crazy, somebody's coming out of their home right now. This is definitely one of the cooler streets in the world. other than its great historical sites, one of the things Philadelphia is most famous for is the Philly cheesesteak. And there's two places that claim to invent it that are famous for it. Pat's, king of steaks, and right across the way, Gino's. Pat's and Gino's are the two most famous ones, and both of them claim to be the originators and the best tasting ones. And I'm going to give that experiment a try. I plan to get one of each and split it and see which one I think is the best. But you can see there's always a line at both places. Let's head over to Pat's first. So first up, I'm gonna try Pat's, and you can see one more thing here. This is a very Italian area of Philadelphia, and this is where Sylvester Stallone stood when he was filming the movie Rocky, November 21st, 1976. Alright, now I'm at Gino's. Get this one to try as well.
Hi, hello. I'm so sorry. ¿Qué vas a pedir tú?
Meatball.
El mío y te pides después el del bebé y el tuyo. Okay. Me das, please, mushroom sheet steak, please.
One, yes. Have a look on a whip.
And my conclusion is they're both delicious.